I am sorry to start the podcast this way, but I have to announce for I think maybe the second or third time that I am leaving the podcast to join my new favorite website, Potato News Today. Before you jump in with your lamentations about me leaving, I just want to tell you a little bit about Potato News Today. It is no nonsense, no frills potato news stories from around the world. Um, yeah,
Wow.
questions.
I'm really sad to see you go.
Yeah.
We've lost another one to the potatoes.
I'm depressed that I have to compete against this news outlet because there's no way I can
Yeah.
keep up.
Nick, why are you on this potato news website?
I happened upon my future employer's website because I was reading an article about potato wine.
Oh, well, you do like tomato wine, so potato wine is obviously the next step. But that's really funny because I watched the first episode of Thirst with Shay Mitchell this weekend, and there was a little segment about potato wine in Peru.
That's right. That's the new
Oh.
series. It's like a drinker's exploration of the world. I'm excited
Mhm.
about that. I watched that first episode too. What'd you think, Ruby?
It was interesting. I learned a lot about Peru. I didn't love Shay Mitchell's adventurous side or lack of adventurous side when it came to trying things, but that's a personal preference. I did feel the guinea pigs were like way too much for me.
Okay, I feel like we need to back up first. Explain who Shay Mitchell is because I didn't know who she was. She's very
Oh,
pretty. She
Shay
seems
Mitchell
very
is
charming.
beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Shay Mitchell is an actress. She was on a TV show that I watched in high school called Pretty Little Liars, based
Hmm.
on
Oh,
a book
yeah,
series.
okay.
So that's how she became famous. She now has a travel accessory company
Hmm.
called, I think, let me look this up. A Base, Beis. So you've probably seen their suitcases and like backpacks and stuff all over social media. And I believe she also has a tequila brand now as well.
Oh, okay. So there is some reason why she's the host. I mean, I thought it was charming. I was really interested to learn about, as we mentioned, the first episode was about Peru, a bunch of different Peruvian beverages. I mean, I think it's worth seeing that you can make distilled spirit that's cheese flavored, dried fish
Yes,
distilled spirit. That was cool.
that was
Did you say
interesting.
what? A what?
Yes,
A
and
dried fish
the
distilled
dried
spirit?
fish was from, I
Lake
believe it was pronounced,
Titicaca.
yes, Lake Titicaca.
Oh, you guys
Um,
are super mature.
Well, Nick, we will miss you. Enjoy your time with Potato News today, and Ruby and I will just be, watching Thirst and continuing on without you, I guess.
Oh, yeah. I was a little disappointed we didn't spend more time talking about my contributions to the podcast before I leave, but I guess we can move on to the rest of my final episode before I join Potato News Daily.
The results are in from the Rejudgment of Paris. Weed wins over wine on days that end in Y. Paper beats rocks, sort of, in the spirits world. And we bring you the buyout rundown for spring 2024. These are the wine news stories we're following this week on the Four Top, your favorite wine podcast. I am your host, Catherine Cole, joined by Nick Toole and Ruby Welkovich.
well, this is the first time I remember flagging a story on WebMD. That's where I saw the headline this week. Daily marijuana use is now more common than daily alcohol use. So, wow, that was fast. Didn't the Biden administration only just announce plans to reclassify marijuana from a Schedule 1 to Schedule 3 drug?
Yeah, legally speaking, or at least according to the DEA, marijuana is still on par with heroin and LSD. It is beyond me why any of those are all on the same level, but
Hmm.
anyway, in people's homes, according to a new report in the scientific journal Addiction, old Mary Jane is now a daily guest. Alcohol still remains the more widely used substance of the two, but this study found that cannabis users are far more likely to be consuming their substance of choice, that kind herb, on a daily basis.
Okay, this is so interesting for a few different reasons. First of all, I want to point out something in the title of the study. It's entitled Changes in Self Reported Cannabis Use in the United States from 1979 to 2022. So it's possible that as restrictions on the sale of marijuana products have eased in recent years, consumers have not only enjoyed increased access to them, but I'm wondering if they've also been a little less maybe reluctant to admit that they are using cannabis products. So I'm just kind of curious, maybe it's not just that they're using more, but maybe they are self reporting more.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. But then again, alcohol has been completely legal and socially acceptable all this time. So you'd think that drinkers would be more likely to fess up than, let's say, tokers or smokers because there's no fear about, possible legal repercussions. But there are now far more people admitting to consuming cannabis on a daily basis than those who say they drink every day, which I think is honestly pretty wild. Recreational weed is still only legal in, I think, 24 states.
Yeah, I'm looking at the paper now and it states that in 2022, the median drinker reported drinking 4 to 5 days in the past month versus 15 to 16 days in the past month for cannabis. And marijuana consumers were 7.4 times more likely to report daily use and almost 4 times as likely to report near daily. So, wow.
Yeah, wow. This is making me wonder like why people consume different substances. I mean, I know I'm a nerd, but for me, wine and spirits, it's all about flavor, relaxation, socialization, education. Like I just love yes, of course, the feeling that wine and spirits give me, just shrugging off those stresses at the end of the day. But for me, it's also about smelling, it's about tasting, it's about discussing what I'm tasting with friends over a meal. It's about learning about regions and winemakers. And maybe I'm biased here, but I'm getting the sense that with marijuana, it's more about just getting that high and less about those other kind of more holistic lifestyle aspects. So, guys, set me straight here. Am I wrong?
Uh, I wouldn't say you're wrong overall. I think you hit the nail on the head a little bit. But in my personal experience, yeah, weed is for socialization and relaxation, so it covers two of the bases you mentioned. But I would not say it's used so much for that sort of educational or exploratory reason or flavor. Some people
Mhm.
smoke for the flavor, they claim. I'm a little bit skeptical of that.
I
You
mean,
know,
come on, doesn't it all really just taste like burnt oregano?
yeah, in my experience, you get like, the first few puffs are like, interesting. And then the rest of it's just, burnt stuff. So, but anyway,
Mhm.
I digress. I'm sure there are people out there that really love digging into the different what cannabinoid, or I don't even know the flavor things, but I can think of a few other reasons why weed might be beating out alcohol. One I thought of was a lot of younger folks are more and more health conscious, and weed is calorie free. So if you can control your munchies, then you have this calorie free mind altering substance, which I think might be a draw for some people. And alcohol is getting hammered for its health downsides, while we're still living in this sort of like partially false reality where we think weed is good for us. So I don't
Because
know.
we know
I'm
nothing about it.
I'm not yeah, I'm not hard being on weed. I like I'm a fan of the sticky stuff myself, but I think some of us are pretending that it's better for us than it probably is.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I'm not a big smoker, but I also think that especially with younger people, the price is also a big aspect. I mean, I don't think that weed is cheap, but I think it's definitely less expensive than wine or cocktails or other spirits. I had a dinner on Friday night and there were 8 of us and we went through 5 bottles of wine. So let's say that in total costs around 100 to $150 for the
Mhm.
whole thing, and I think that, had it just been weed, it would have been significantly cheaper. So,
That's a very good point. I did not consider that.
That is a really good point. And it's funny that you mentioned young people because also this week, the New York Times is reporting that legalized weed is landing more seniors in the ER. Now, this is a report from the Journal of the American Medical Association that tracked ER visits after Canada legalized weed. And guess what? ER visits for cannabis poisoning doubled among people ages 65 and older after Canada legalized sale of the cannabis flower, and then it tripled just 15 months later when Canada legalized the sale of edibles. Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of tough to know your dosage in edibles, even if they're professionally made. And you have to consider those things. You also have to consider with alcohol, like metabolism and how much you've eaten and all that. If you smoke, you can kind of adjust where you're at, but edibles are a little more all in.
yeah, I have trouble with edibles as well. I'm known to eat like a corner of one gummy just because I'm a scaredy cat. But yeah, I think it's different. It's obviously different in every state, but it's definitely different in New York because the regulations are just so unclear, which I think is I don't know what's going on in Canada, but I can imagine, if people don't know exactly what they're buying or if they're buying synthetic weed or, the stores are just selling it without any sort of education or checking ID or whatever it is that you need. I think that that could be why it's doubling and tripling.
All right, so as listeners know, the unsustainable nature of glass beverage bottles has kind of been a personal interest of mine this past year, so I'm pretty excited about this next story here.
All right, what have you got for us? Lighter glass bottles, reused and recycled glass bottles.
No, even better, paper bottles.
Ooh, this is exciting. Tell us more.
I will. I've got more right here. The international spirits producer, Diageo, announced this week that they are testing Bailey's Irish Cream in a dry molded fiber bottle. So it was a small run of about 2,000 mini bottles that were sold at the Time Out Festival in Barcelona this past weekend. But if this little pilot program goes well, and so far reports are that it did, it could mean that we will see paper bottles on, let's say, airplanes or at sporting events or, who knows elsewhere.
Wow, that's so cool. The future is here. I don't know if you guys have been watching Bodies on Netflix, but in the scenes that are set in the future, like 34 years from now, the characters are drinking wine from paper bottles.
Love it.
Okay, I like what I'm hearing. So wine is still going to be the go-to beverage of choice in a few decades.
According to Netflix.
Yeah, wine will never go out of style. But back to the present, this Bailey's paper bottle comes from a company called Pulpac that has developed what it calls, as you mentioned, dry molded fiber technology. So these bottles are made from 90% paper with a foil seal and a thin plastic liner, which apparently does not need to be separated from the rest of the bottle before recycling.
Now, this is not our first news about paper bottles for liquor or wine. These bottles have been hitting the market for the past few months.
Yeah, there's another company, Frugal Pack, that had a big presence at Provine this year, where they announced they were producing paper bottles for quite a few international brands, including the house wines of the Aldi supermarket chain in the UK, as well as the UK chains Waitrose and Tesco.
That's so interesting because Aldi owns Trader Joe's, so I wonder if that's successful if the 2 buck truck, I don't even know if it's 2 bucks anymore, but the wine from Trader Joe's will also start coming in these packs.
Paper check.
And Bonnie Doon's low carbon footprint rosé, which is bottled in a paper frugal pack wine bottle, is hitting Whole Food store shelves right about now. So I'm going to keep an eye out for this paper bottle rosé and I'll give it a try.
I do see a downside to all this, though.
Hmm.
Oh, what is that?
You can't really do a message in a bottle. Like this isn't going to last out on the high seas, so that could be a problem. Yeah, we're gonna lose one of our like major means of communication.
Very reliable form of communication as well.
Yeah, very modern.
Yeah, I've dropped a call, but I've never dropped a message in a bottle. So
So, have you guys heard about the Judgment of Paris?
Isn't that a painting? Like the original beauty pageant from Greek mythology?
Oh, yeah. I guess that was the OG Judgment of Paris. But in the wine world, this phrase refers to a 1976 Parisian wine competition staged by the late, great Stephen Spurrier. Napa wines were pitted against French wines in this blind tasting, and everyone was shocked when the California bottlings came out on top. There were, I remember, a couple books about this, and then a couple movies came out as well about this.
Yes, most famously Bottle Shock from 2008 starring Chris Pine.
Oh my God. I have been seeing that guy everywhere in my social media with a giant beard. Like, what is going on with Chris Pine?
Yeah, it is not cute.
He needs to go back to his bottle shock look.
it's for a new movie he's doing, but I've seen the reviews and they don't look great.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Anyway,
Anyway,
moving beyond Chris Pine, according to the Sunday Times of London, a Judgment Part 2 style tasting was held at the London Wine Fair last week. But the rules were a little bit different this time. It pitted wines from multiple European nations against wines from multiple New World nations. So it wasn't just France versus California.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of a random assortment of just 32 wines in total, and it was blind tasted by 21 professional judges, which seemed like a weird ratio to me. It seemed to me like they could have tasted more wines. The wines also to me looked like a mishmash of varieties and styles, and I wondered if maybe it was just that the wineries had paid to participate or like what exactly the qualifications were for entry. As the Times of London pointed out, with different grape varieties pitted against one another, it was kind of a competition of apples against pears. It wasn't really an even matchup. So I'm sure it was difficult for judges to come to conclusions when they were comparing completely different categories.
I think they gotta run this a little bit more like they run the old Westminster Dog Show.
Yeah.
You compare wines of the same variety and the same region before you pit them against the rest of the pack. That's how we got a high-strung miniature poodle with a mohawk as our winner at the Westminster Dog Show this year. I don't know if you guys saw that, but
And I don't know if you guys are going to get it, but poodle with a mohawk has much significance for me being the age I am. I'm just going to leave it there.
I have no idea what either of you guys are talking about, but this all just sounds like a big publicity stunt. It's like an international wine tasting. Like, doesn't this happen all the time? For me, the shocker is the winning white wine only costs about 24 euros. The 2011 Pegasus Bay Belcanto Riesling from Waipara Valley in New Zealand. With today's exchange rate, that's $26 for wine, which is something I can actually afford.
yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny that a Riesling, an aged Riesling from New Zealand won. I mean, good on the Kiwis for that. I would also like to point out that, side note, I am just weirded out that the British spell judgment with an E in the middle because as Americans, we leave that E out. But anyway, in the Reds, the old world did prevail over the new world, and the winner was a 2012 Hermitage from the Rhone.
Apparently, once all the runners up were factored in, the old world new world split was pretty even. So I'm not really sure what we get from that, other than I guess that the entire world of winemaking is pretty much on par, and maybe just maybe this was a publicity stunt.
But they got us to talk about it.
They did.
You know
Shit.
why? You know why? Because I just wanted to say poodle with a mohawk.
Fair. Very fair. So, since there have been a lot of big winery sales and shutdowns over the past couple of weeks, we decided to save them up and do a roundup. Let's see if we can get this done in less than 60 seconds. So, one sec, taking out my phone to do a timer. All right, the timer is on. So, Catherine, go.
Okay, first in business news, in Washington, the Seattle based investment firm Ackley Capital has bought the prominent Betts Family Winery, and Ackley Brands is on a tear because in April it bought two of Washington's best known wineries, Hogue Cellars and Columbia Winery from Gallo family.
Ruby, go.
And in California's Santa Barbara County, Constellation Brands has bought the iconic winery Sea Smoke. The sale includes 1,100 acres of land, 256 of them planted with biodynamic vines, according to Wine Spectator.
All right, next turn. And now to Sonoma, where Ramsgate has sold to the beverage conglomerate O'Neill Vintners and Distillers. Now, the CEO, Jeff O'Neill, was one of Ramsgate's four founders. Ooh, that's a tongue twister. So this isn't as out of nowhere as some of the other acquisitions this week.
And I will finish us up in the Napa Valley, where hipster wineries are closing. Tarpon Cellars just shut its doors, and this is just a few months after Brendel Winery closed its tasting room. Both brands sold the kind of biodynamic Frizzante, Verdejo, cool wines that should be killing it right now. So, my resident young people, what gives?
And that's time. A little bit over, but I'm impressed with how well we did. But since we are out of time, we will not be telling you why these hipster brands are busting.
That's also because we aren't hipsters.
You're
Um,
not?
no, we're younger than hipsters, and we're
Oh.
definitely hipper than hipsters.
What's cooler than being cool? It's being
Ice cold.
30.
Wait, so should we say a little bit more about hipsters or should we leave it?
I think just leave it.
Okay,
The more we say about hipsters, the more each of us sounds our own age.
I see. Okay.
Okay.
That was directed toward me
That,
I'm okay with that. All right, let's keep going.
I thought that was an artful way of putting it. So, can I tell you guys a little bit about what our listeners are saying on social media?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So, listeners, as you know, we put questions out every week and we want you guys to share your thoughts with us. So, this past week, we asked, have you ever made your own non grape wine? How did it turn out? So, I'm looking at some of the responses. And Sparkling Winos, we've had those folks on the podcast before. They say that Magnetic Chill Winery makes a pretty epic rhubarb sparkling. So
Ooh,
Ooh,
be on the lookout for that.
I
that
want
sounds
some.
so good.
Then that does sound very good. Then we've got Ruderdall. I think that's right. Ruderdall says, no, wine is made of grapes. Okay, purist here. Uh, but I've made fermented juice and lemonade. All right, Ruderdall.
Hmm.
And then Suncroft Jared says, yeah, made a good sparkling Palisade peach one time, but my apricot always went freaky. And then
Ooh.
Zafu Snafu said
Your
that
favorite.
my favorite, they said that they had a customer make banana wine all the time and they
Whoa.
never wanted to try it. So
My kid came home from a trip with banana ketchup.
Oh, yeah, from
Um,
the
oh,
Philippines.
I've heard of that. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So I'm wrapping my mind around banana wine. I think it's possible. This definitely has the sugar. I don't know about the acidity though.
I kind of like the idea of labeling it like freaky apricot wine. I think that
Yeah.
that's a good name.
And anyway, folks, we are going to ask more questions in the future. So please look for those and send us your thoughts.
Yeah. Hang out on our Instagram feed.
It's pretty cool. It's non-toxic.
It's non-toxic. Yeah.
Organic.
I think it's time for our dessert course, and I feel like I've been hogging all the desserts lately. So, Nick, I think it's your turn. What's up? What are we having for dessert?
I haven't done one in a while, I don't think. I'm going to do a beer. Whoops.
Okay.
Sorry. Beer
That's
time.
okay. We need it. Summer's around the corner. We need beer.
So I used to and still kind of do work at Allagash, and so I'm a little bit biased, but Allagash makes a beer that I revisited recently called Interlude, which is a super saison that gets a second fermentation with Brettanomyces yeast. So a super saison is just a higher ABV saison. It is then fermented again with a Brettanomyces yeast strain, which is a proprietary yeast strain that Allagash has.
I'm sorry, I have to break in. This is so funny because wine people, it's subject to debate, but most wine people hate Brett. Like Brett
Ooh.
is like barnyard, it's like stinky, and they don't want Brett in their wine. But you're saying Brettanomyces, this is like you actually have a house strain of it and you want that in your beer.
Some beer. And Brettanomyces yeast can differ depending on the type that you use. There's some more commercially available ones that produce more barnyardy flavor. This particular in-house proprietary one ends up creating a lot of like tropical fruit character in the beer.
Ooh.
So yeah, it creates some really nice flavors. But for you wine folks out there, we then age a portion of that in red wine barrels, and that is blended back in with a younger version of the beer. And so it ends up being this like extremely sort of wine-like, delicious, fruit-forward, rich. It's got some like a little bit of tannic structure from the barrel aging. It's really fantastic. That's called Interlude. And if you live in a state where Allagash sells its beer, you might be able to find it. So be on the lookout. It's really fucking good. Yeah.
Nice.
My mind is reeling right now. Because in my business, Brett is considered a flaw or a fault. So this is actually I'm intrigued and curious.
I haven't gotten over the use of barnyard as an adjective for a beverage. in either context, but that's great. I'm gonna give it a try.
All right. Well, this has been the Four Top Podcast. I am our executive producer, Catherine Cole.
I'm our producer, Nick Toole.
I'm media and design manager Ruby Walkovich.
Keelan King is our sound supervisor and the performer and composer of our incredibly scintillating theme music. Please visit our website, thefourtop.org, to learn more about us and listen to back episodes. And we would sell bucket hats if there was enough if there was enough demand. So folks, let us know if you need wine pants or bucket hats. We might consider producing them. If you have not already subscribed to the Four Top on iTunes or Spotify or wherever you listen, please do so, and please leave us a rating.
Hey y'all, this is Importante. Every rating feeds the algorithm and helps new listeners find the Four Top.
Well, from the Judgment of Portland, where I am judging my own personal dog show, that's Ginger versus Pablo, with no clear winner, because I can't take sides. This is Catherine Cole signing out.
From the soon-to-be potato wine capital of the world, Maine, where at one point my grandfather's family had the second largest potato farm, this is Nick Toole signing out.
And from the former land of the hipsters, Brooklyn, New York, this is Ruby signing out. Stay safe out there, and thanks for listening.